Recently I had the opportunity to attend UNGA in New York, the gathering of all the world leaders at the United Nations, and had an opportunity to ask a few questions of the president of Turkey, Erdogan. Now, Turkey shares a border with Syria. It's akin to the U.S.-Mexico border. Turkey has loosely constructed walls along the border to prevent illegal immigration. Everyone is aware of our immigration problem here in the States. And one of Syria's largest groups fighting against the Assad regime and occupies eastern Syria is the Syrian Defense Force. They have been well supported by our government militarily in both manning, training, and equipment for so many years. Now, in Iraq, the Kurdish national group known as the PKK has been labeled as foreign terrorist organization by both Turkey and our government. Their Syrian offshoot is the Syrian Kurd group, and they have been fighting with and folded into the SDF. This is a large reason for Erdogan's dislike of the United States. It also leads to the same border issues we have with Mexico today. And in my conversation with the president of Turkey, I asked him a few pointed questions, and you get an opportunity to hear his responses. And then following that, our CIA operative, Mr. Keys, will join us to give his assessment. But first, my one-on-one with President Erdogan of Texas, Turkey. Mr. President, what does the United States government need to do regarding the Syrian Defense Force to gain full Turkish support as an allied partner? And do you support any kind of funding or assistance to the SDF by our government? If not, how do we combat the Assad dictatorship in Syria? And finally, on a personal note, as a broadcast owner in this country, obviously there's much propaganda about you as a strong man, and yet you were able to win a very tough re-election to the surprise of many Americans when you think about the propaganda that we sometimes spread about people we don't know. So finally, what is it that the American people should know about you as Turkey's president that's not often on broadcast or print media in our country? Thank you.
Amerikan halkı her şeyden önce şunu bilmeli. Jeffrey Wexler bu noktada beni burada en eski tanıyanlar. Erdoğan defa demokrasiye inanmış bir insan. 21 yıldır demokrasi mücadelesini vere vere konumunu koruyor. Halkının %99'u Müslüman olan bir ülkede Erdoğan demokrasi mücadelesini kazanarak buralara gelmiştir. Ve mesela karşımızda ana muhalefet altılı masa kurmuştur. Bu altılı masa için de yeri gelmiştir, şunu söylemiştir. Altılı masa değil, gerekirse 16'lı masa kurarım demiştir. Ama bizim öyle bir altılı masa, 16'lı masa, 160'lı masa diye bir derdimiz olmadı. Biz sadece halkımıza gittik ve halkımızın verdiği destekle %52 oyu almayı başardık. Ve bu şekilde geldik. Şu anda yerel seçimler var. Ve bu yerel seçimleri de yine aynı şekilde başarıyla alacağımıza inanıyorum. Ve bu konuda bizim üzerinde ısrarla durduğumuz, bırakalım halkın tercihi neyse halkın tercihine saygı duyalım. Halkın tercihiyle de yolumuza devam edelim. Ama karşımızdakiler bu şekilde yola devam etmiyorlar. Örneğin İngiltere'ye gitmiş ana muhalefetin başındaki zat. Oradan 300 milyar dolar söz almış. Seçimden sonra İngiltere 300 milyar dolar kendisine kredi verecekmiş. Siz seçim öncesi herhangi bir siyasi partinin dünyanın herhangi bir ülkesinden böyle bir kredi alabileceğini duydunuz mu? Düşündünüz mü? Ama bunlar böyle yalancı. Biz ise İngiltere bize şu kadar kredi verecek. Körfez şu kadar kredi verecek. Böyle bir yalanın içerisine girmeyiz. Biz halkımızla beraber büyüdük. Halkımızla beraber bu yola devam ediyoruz, devam edeceğiz. Ve onun için de elimizdeki finansman kaynaklarımız her geçen gün artmış. Göreve geldiğimizde 36 milyar dolar ihracatımız varken şu anda 100-250 milyar dolar ihracata sahip bir ülke haline geldik. Nereden? Nereye? Bir ülke böyle büyür. Yalanla büyümez. Ve şu anda Türkiye altyapısıyla, üst yapısıyla dünyada örnek gösterilebilecek bir konuma gelmiştir. Hiç endişe etmeyin. Amerikalı dostlarımıza da güzellikleri anlatın.
And Mr. Operative, you had an opportunity to listen at what the President Erdogan had to say. Your comments from your years from working in that part of the region.
For scoring a head of state interview like that with a guy like Erdogan, who is in a very important position overseas, the Turkish government, the Turkish system overall, and the size of their nation and strategic location is a critical component of the U.S. national security structure. And the thing that jumps out from the interview initially, when you sift through the opposition and foreign interference with money, the exchange rate has a component in that makes it a more realistic number. But the economic power of Turkey and what they export, especially in the area of heavy construction and infrastructure, is enormous. It's the reason that Iraq was able to get back on its feet, especially the Kurdish areas, as quickly as they did after the invasion in 2003, because the vast majority of steel, rebar, and concrete came from Turkey, along with engineering expertise, architectural design expertise. The Turks know how to build things, build big things, and build roads. And roads are the key to expanding stability from these war-torn areas. When you look at the videos from the war areas, there's very few roads that are actually paved. They're in these areas of the nation, a large segment of which has only dirt roads. And the Turks have proven themselves quite adept at building highways. If you go to the Kurdish area of Iraq, you now have a 120-kilometer ring road around the city of Erbil. That is a super highway. It's something that you would see in Germany or Los Angeles. It's not an easy build, but it's impressive that they have done it and done it as fast as they can build. So he's leading with some very important factors that you don't hear in the news cycle in the U.S. It's economic power. It's not just military power. It's economic force. It's the same instrument that the U.S. used to have when it came to foreign activities, is our economic power, our manufacturing power. A lot of things are made in Turkey, and a lot of things are manufactured and trucked from Turkey. If you ever go to the Habur Gate, which is the main gate from the Turkish side to the northern Iraq side, it's a 24-hour operation, 2 lanes of solid traffic 24 hours a day coming in and out of Iraq. That's just one gate. You have a similar thing now starting to surface in Syria, northern Syria, of how much material that can come out of Turkey, manufactured goods, food goods, everything that comes from there. He's a very important guy and a big ego and a hard interview. And kudos to you for scoring it, because a lot of news was made in what he had to say during his visit here.
So, why do you think the Western narrative is always portraying him as a tyrant? We know he plays a very critical role in Ukraine. He's played a critical role with NATO right now, whether or not the Sweden will be admitted as a NATO member. We know he has the ear of Putin, and he has a lot of leverage, and yet he appears to have some disdain for the Western media.
And I don't think he's alone in that either. There's a lot of countries that you talk to in the region, and I just spent 3 months out there, that are pretty upset with the U.S. system overall. And it's not just the government. They don't see the U.S. mainstream media as a credible instrument anymore. When you look at some of these videos that come from war zones and from conflict areas, and you really pay attention to where the reporter is calling in from, there'll be one blurb, you have to look for it, that'll say that they're on the roof of a 5-star hotel in Tel Aviv. They're phoning it in. They're phoning in the reporting. There's not a ground truth system where you used to have live shots from the field with a news guy from a mainstream outlet, one of the major networks, cable or the old school 3 big ones in the U.S., where they were on the ground, pay attention to what was going on locally and talking to people on the ground. You don't see that anymore. Not sure why, but it's just not a credible outlet. And people like Erdogan, and there are many others that don't feel as though they get a very fair shake, because if you're just using talking points that is fed out through the White House or the system in the States as your news points, you're not keeping the government honest. And that part of the way the U.S. is designed is a critical component to keep the government in check. The media is the safety valve for keeping the government honest. And if you become part of the government's talking point system, you're no longer doing your job. And I think that's one of the major friction points in America today. People don't believe what they hear. But if you search around, like your interview with Erdogan, you really get to hear what does this guy think? What does Erdogan really see? What does he feel? What is bothering him? The best example of the conflict is the PKK. We have like a schizophrenic perspective on how we manage issues. You can't go into Syria in force, and we're there with combat troops, and you want to deal with the SDF, but the PKK is a terrorist group listed by the State Department. You can't have both things. You can't parse that out. You have to fix one or the other. And Erdogan understands that. The U.S. willfully ignores many of the facts on the ground. Like we will just impose our reality on someone else. And it doesn't work. It hasn't worked. And we saw it fail in Iraq, and we saw it fail in Afghanistan. And now we have a conflict in northern Syria that spills into Turkey, spills into Iraq. And it is a regional hotspot that is a cause for great concern in the theater. And the truth about what is actually happening on the ground is not getting out through the mainstream media. It's confusing. And people in the U.S. are confused by what the government's doing and saying. The effect overseas is 10x that, because they pay attention overseas to what the White House says. You'll see live feeds of things from the White House during the business day out there in the Middle East. They're watching what the president says, what the National Security Council says, and what the Congress is doing. And being back here and seeing it the way all of us see it, it must look like a Ringling Brothers show overseas, because people don't understand where we're going or what we want.
Well, listen, I can't thank you enough always for your insights and your integrity on this issue. And I was happy to give a different perspective on President Erdogan on our platform. When we come back for the remainder of the broadcast, we will be joined by the United States Attorney for the state of Maryland, the Honorable Erek Barron. Stay tuned. We'll be back.
Yeah.
Yes, Attorney Barron, welcome to the broadcast. How difficult is it today for law enforcement?
So first of all, thank you so much for having me. Law enforcement is difficult. It's a difficult job across the board, from the cop on the beat to the prosecutor in the courtroom and in the office and beyond. It's difficult work, but it's fulfilling, and people do it because they know they're making a difference.
What do you think you have accomplished the most in your 2 years as the U.S. Attorney for Maryland?
Well, I hope in collaboration and working with our team at the U.S. Attorney's Office and more broadly that we've had a significant influence on violent crime. I came in nearly 2 years ago, and particularly in Baltimore City, we've had an unprecedented number of years in violent crime and homicides, above 300 plus every year now for the past 8 years. And knocking on wood, we are on track to hopefully break that cycle as a team. And I could say as of today, Baltimore City is down 20+% in homicides, I think 10+% in non-fatal shootings. But it's not just in Baltimore City, it's throughout the state. And in Prince George's, we're down, I think as of today, down 10% in homicides. So we've taken that on as an office in an unprecedented, to an unprecedented degree. And we've shown that, as a team, federal, state, and local, and community, we really can make a difference, and we are.
But what you're also saying is that crime is significantly dropping in cities like Baltimore under your leadership because of the work of the U.S. Attorney on the federal level. We do know that the governor, Westmore, and his predecessor, Governor Hogan, has given more resources to the U.S. Attorney Office than any other state in the United States that support these efforts. How important is that support from the governor?
Yes, that's my understanding. And in Maryland, we are blessed with great partnerships across the board. I'm focused as U.S. Attorney and our office in turning those partnerships into great teamwork. And yes, unprecedented level of funding, which began under former Governor Hogan, and it's been seamless with Governor Westmore. That funding has continued with the potential of expanding thanks to both governors and the Maryland General Assembly.
Explain to our audience this police reform and the Accountability Act, and do you suffer restraints as a result of it?
So I'm not sure, state legislation doesn't have that much of an effect on what we do. My position is whatever the state does, whatever our local and state partners decide that is best policy-wise for them, we will adjust and work with our partners as a team to get the job done. We just have to. The public is depending on us.
How many criminal prosecutions, Mr. U.S. Attorney, do you initiate, let's say, annually, and how does that number compare with Maryland State or local prosecutions?
Oh, so I'm ballparking, but we probably have 10% or so of the criminal prosecutions that happen throughout the state. Most of the investigations and prosecutions of your kind of run-of-the-mill violent crime, and crime generally, is done by your local and state officials. We are a relatively small shop that has to cover the entire state. And so what we do is try to focus our resources on, as far as violent crime, the most violent, the repeat violent offenders, and those individuals and organizations who are the most drivers of the violence in our communities. And I think we're in a great position as the U.S. Attorney's Office to be a leader among our law enforcement and community organizations in this space to help be a convener, a mediator, a facilitator, to help us all collaborate, to help us work as a team and be on the same page.
So then how important is it for the state legislature to make sure they put laws in place to make sure that these repeat offenders, that people are prosecuted for crimes that they commit, depending on what that crime is, whether it's homicide, whether it's rape, or however what you're pursuing at the time. How important is that state legislature?
Well, the legislature, I'm a former member of the legislature. They represent their various constituencies, and collectively they come together and make decisions based on what is best for the state, what they are seeing around the state data-wise, and what the state's values are. And it's our job as the U.S. Attorney's Office to see that, to work with whatever their judgment may be, policy-wise, and determine what gaps we can fill and how we can facilitate and help and work together. There's that word again, team, as a team.
Let's go into a little more depth about sometimes the gaps that you need to fill. So
sometimes our local state's attorney's office or your local police department may not have the ability, the expertise, or the capacity to take on a large criminal organization or a large drug trafficking organization. We do have the expertise and the tools as their federal partner to work those kind of investigations, to broadly investigate and root out organizations that may be across the state, regional, or even international. Your local police department and your local state's attorney's office don't typically have that ability to do it alone, so that's where we can come in.
How many prosecutions end with guilty pleas, and what percentages actually go to jail?
Oh, at the U.S. Attorney's Office, we have, somewhere around a 98 or so % conviction rate. And because we are focused on those who are the drivers of violence, your repeat violent offenders, and cases that will send a message of deterrence to the individual and more broadly, typically we're talking about matters that end up in incarceration.
So what is your conviction rate for cases that go to trial?
Yes, for cases that go to trial, we are, near 100%. We're not,
wow.
We don't win everything, but our losses are very few and far in between. Because by the time we're trying a case, we've crossed our T's, dotted our I's every which way.
Fait accompli.
Yes.
This is more about federal versus the state. What crime, Mr. U.S. Attorney, must a 17-year-old in a state of Maryland commit to be prosecuted by you?
He says 17-year-old?
Yes.
So typically,
teenagers.
Yeah. So the federal system is not built to prosecute juveniles, generally speaking. We can, but the setup, the apparatus is burdensome in that respect. Typically, your juveniles are left to the state and local system to prosecute.
But the juvenile crimes that we see today are unprecedented. And when you see this kind of behavior, which seems that some people say is encouraged by laws passed by legislatures, you have people in state office who don't believe that 25 years under should have a criminal record. You have them believing that teenagers, 16 and 17-year-olds, should not be incarcerated. But it's obvious by your track record to date, you are a law and order guy, and you believe that sometimes 25, 16s, or whatever need to be prosecuted by the full extent of the law. This is what your record has shown.
Well, certainly believe in accountability. There's no question about it. But our office is also involved in prevention and intervention. Our office is modeling that we have to do, it's not an either or, it's both and so we have a community outreach unit that is getting into schools with anti-violence and anti-bullying programming. We work with community organizations and I do community walks with organizations like ROCA in Baltimore. Our office hosts re-entry fairs. We got within the next month, about 3 separate re-entry fairs throughout the state. If you're just doing law and order or focus on accountability after somebody's already done something, you're only going to have limited success. You're spinning your wheels. And so we're trying to model that we have to be involved in prevention and intervention. We have to be working with community-based organizations in this space. We have to do more, and that's why my office also issued a public service announcement recently.
We're going to talk about that when we come back. But listen, how effective is this intervention with these young people? Because when you look at the numbers in the state of Maryland, I mean, Baltimore alone, before your policies began to take effect, had almost 385 homicides, half of the state. So you talk about these preventive measures. Do you need to do something in addition to these preventive measures that young people will respond to more than others? What is still missing here? Because it doesn't seem to impact the enormous uptick in crime by this younger generation.
Well, I think we're seeing an impact. About a year ago, the Department of Justice funded at least 3 separate organizations in Baltimore, ROCA Baltimore, the Black Mental Health Alliance, and Living Classrooms. And the focus is on those organizations that have a track record, an evidence-based track record of success in prevention and intervention. And that work in sync with law enforcement and accountability efforts and also prevention efforts is what's going to reduce crime in Baltimore City and beyond.
This is the Armstrong Williams Show, and we're so honored to have the United States Attorney, Erek Barron, as our guest, appointed by President Joe Biden, and we'll continue this conversation after these messages.
T, what are you doing here?
Hey, Tosh. I'm not gonna be home, all right?
But what about the keys? I can't get in.
Look, it ain't like that, all right?
When are you coming back?
In charge right now, Tasha.
I don't understand.
Just feed my birds for me, all right? Later, Tasha.
T.
Tasha, will you come with me, please?
I want to talk to you about T.
Powerful public service announcement. I think what is often overlooked in crime is that the lingering impact it has on families for such a long time. Sometimes when brothers go to jail, the little sister has no one else at home to care for them. Sometimes they're put in foster care. When the father's placed in jail, sometimes they're just left all alone. And we don't talk enough about the lingering impact of crime. And we want to discuss that with you today,
Sure.
U.S. Attorney Barron.
Thank you. Yeah, we don't talk enough about it. All day, almost every day, out of our office comes a press release. And 9 times out of 10, it's about an indictment, a sentencing, something bad has happened, and someone is being held appropriately accountable. And that message is important. and that sends a message of deterrence to the individuals involved, and also hopefully a general deterrence to those out there, and sends the message, hey, if you do wrongdoing, you may end up in a federal courthouse and in a federal correctional institution. But we don't talk enough about what your actions might mean to others, not just victims of violent crime, but your own, your mother, your grandmother, your sister, someone in your household, someone you love and care about. We don't talk about that enough, and the impact, the ripple effect that has through our communities.
Explain to our listeners what was going on in the package with the little girl in the classroom. Her brother comes to her, and then they come and escort her out of the class, and she finds herself in a room with glass that you can't really hear what's going on with law enforcement.
Right. So I
which happens across the country.
Right.
Often.
That scenario is real, and I would like for the viewer to fill the gaps for themselves. But clearly, we have a young girl in a classroom. Looks like maybe they're taking a test, but then appears someone she knows, appears to be probably her brother. No one else in the classroom seems to know that this is going on, that she's having this interaction. So maybe it's a ghost, or maybe someone's hurt and has found some way to send a message to someone they care about. We see a red spot on T's back. Something has hurt T. And then the principal comes in, and we cut to an office, probably the principal's office, and there's a Baltimore City officer talking to Tasha and telling her something about T, and clearly it's not good news. I'd rather the audience fill the gaps of what may or may not have happened, but the gist is that it's gun violence. You see that message, and gun violence, and that something wrong has happened, and it's impacted not just T, not just this young man, but someone in his household. And you can imagine all the things that may mean, as you alluded to Tasha and whomever else that T cares about, that Tasha cares about. What's going to happen to this little girl? Who's going to pick her up? But the other message is this, and that's we're trying to drive people to our website and to our community-based partners, to our important prevention and intervention efforts, to make the point that you, not just the United States Attorney, and not just law enforcement, but members of the community can have a role in ending gun violence. And that's what we hope to drive people to the website, to show that there are people doing the hard work on the ground, and that we as ordinary citizens can be a part of that teamwork to end gun violence.
Yeah, I want to follow because we hear this new terminology called victimless crime, and they like to associate this with car theft. They say, well, with car theft, there's no victim. Well, look, the insurance policy, you still have debt on an asset which you no longer have.
Right.
If you paid $30,000 for that vehicle and you put down 20%, you're out of $6,000. Is there such a thing as victimless crime if you're the victim of this 7,000+ car thefts in the Baltimore City area?
Right. I would say that there are few, if any, truly victimless crimes. I think you're right.
News report that overall liberal Democrats in Maryland are aligning themselves against state legislatures to change the laws that put criminals away. How involved are you, and does it enhance or hinder your job?
I'm not involved at all in the state legislature and the work that they're doing. They were duly elected, and they are working on behalf of their constituents. My job is, regardless of what comes out of Annapolis or what comes out of D.C., my job is to get it done in tandem and in teamwork with all of our partners. It has to include the community. It has to include local, state, and federal law enforcement. Regardless of the play that's called, we got to get the blocking and tackling done.
You know, it's interesting, the focus is always on Maryland, is crime in Baltimore City. But you know, crime is off the charts in Washington, D.C. as well. But it seems as though it gets a pass.
I don't know. I'm taking care of, the District of Maryland. I do work with our United States attorneys in D.C. and the Eastern District of Virginia. We work well together. We meet and talk and coordinate periodically because, those who do wrong, they don't care about the borders between, the DMV, so to speak. It's my job to, wherever possible, coordinate and work with my fellow colleagues at Justice and at Main Justice, and we do. Whatever I can do, and we work with our local partners, Chief Aziz in Prince George's County, to make sure that we can work seamlessly together across the borders.
What informs your exercise of prosecutorial discretion, and what are the top 3 federal crimes that you, as U.S. Attorney of Maryland, prosecute? And do you decide your priorities, or do you take direction from the U.S. Attorney General?
It's a great question. So it starts with the Attorney General, who has articulated, the mission is, uphold the rule of law, to keep our nation safe, to protect civil rights, and to safeguard the citizens' property. And so we start with those general principles, and then I dig down and say, what does that mean for the District of Maryland? And my process coming into the office was to meet with each and every individual in the office, and then more broadly, all of our partners, to determine what do those priorities mean for Maryland, and where should we start with Maryland. And really, it's no secret. First among equals has to be violent crime. And I've decided that our office needs to tackle that like never before. And so I'm focused on not just the complex drug conspiracies, RICO conspiracies. We have to do that work as the United States Attorney's Office, but we can do more with street-level violence. And we do that, I think, in a preventative manner by going after gun trafficking, illegal gun trafficking, and those who are prohibited from carrying a firearm, and prosecuting felons and possession of firearms. Now, we have limited resources, so my theory of the case is that if we focus on those who are most violent, and particularly repeat violent offenders, and we catch them holding a firearm, if we prosecute them swiftly, certainly, then we will have prevented some other violence from even occurring, so that hopefully we don't even have to get to that broader kind of organizational conspiracy, because we're taking them off the streets before they do something. And so we are prosecuting, coming out of the pandemic, a lot more repeat violent offenders for gun possession and gun trafficking.
U.S. Attorney Erek Barron is our guest, and we'll be back. If you believe every child is deserving of a quality education, please go to educationjusticefoundation.com. Do you think law enforcement in general in the United States still wrestle with racism? It seems as though, and this is just my observation, that there are a lot of well-meaning people that believe that there are too many black youth incarcerated, and they get caught up in this thing called mass incarceration.
Right.
And when you look at the state of Maryland, you have 6.1 citizens, and only 15,000 people commit the crimes. How that is mass incarceration defined, I don't understand. And so they put these laws in place because they feel there are too many black young men in jail. How do you balance out making decisions based on race, and then you forget about the behavior, you forget about the repeating of that behavior, where people lose their lives, they lose their way of life, businesses are destroyed, and young people begin to believe they're emboldened to commit these crimes and can also be used by others because they believe the law favors their behavior.
Look, when we prosecute, we're not concerned with race, creed, color, anything. We're concerned with the facts and the law, and particularly those who are doing the most harm. We do have too many people incarcerated, but we need to get to a point where we don't have people harming one another. And the fact is, those who are making us fearful in our communities because of the harm that they're doing, we have to hold them accountable. And we have to also do a better job of making sure people have the values and the opportunities to not to commit crime in the first place, so that we don't have too many people incarcerated. But we also don't want too many people being harmed in our community.
What 3 reforms, or maybe 2, that you champion, Mr. U.S. Attorney, that diminishes crime?
Well, as the U.S. Attorney, I'm not in a position of championing
maybe the wrong
policies,
term, but that you encourage.
I can say it. As an office, I know that our office is doing as much or more, probably significantly more, than the office has done in the recent past in community engagement and in bringing the community into the fold, into our strategy of crime prevention and intervention. We can do a better job of modeling that we're only spinning our wheels if we're only focused on accountability. We have to also be doing those things that are going to get people successfully re-entered into our society from incarceration and being good, productive citizens. We have to be in our schools and making sure that kids are going to school in the first place, and that when they are, they're protected, that they're getting their education, and that we are providing them all of the opportunities that others in all communities should have.
How frequently do you prosecute state or local police for federal civil rights criminal violations like the George Floyd death in Minnesota? And do you hesitate to avoid alienating the police in the future cases where their cooperation is needed?
Well, those who are familiar with our office know that that we do prosecute law enforcement when they do wrong. We have active and ongoing investigations and prosecutions right now, and we will not hesitate to hold police accountable when they violate federal civil rights laws.
Well, do you bring criminal cases only when you think you have proof of guilt beyond a reasonable doubt before the jury is selected?
Yes. I mean, we only bring those cases where we are fully confident that the facts and the law are there. Now, ultimately, that's up to a grand jury to indict, and everyone is innocent until proven guilty. But we don't bring the case until we are confident that the allegations are true.
And that's why you almost have 100%.
That's why.
That's why. Something you touched on, I made a note on something that you keep coming back to. You really placed an emphasis on the importance of poverty, poor schools, and broken families, lack of education that leads to this increase in crime.
Well, I do think that the the family and however you might define that. I think of it broadly, but the household, that unit of people that care about one another, that love each other, that have one another's back, that are a positive influence on one another, is and can be so critical on whether someone goes to the left and wrong, or goes to the right and goes to school and fulfills their potential, so to speak. And that's partly what that public service announcement is trying to get to. Is like, wait a minute, that household, that thing is important. And so many of us, we may not care about ourselves or what happens to ourselves. We may not have that somebodyness. Dr. Martin Luther King talked about the life's blueprint, and it starts with somebodyness. That belief in yourself that you matter, that you are somebody. And unfortunately, in some communities, young people don't have that. And I'm trying to emphasize that, in every way I can when I go into schools and when I'm out in the community. And hopefully maybe this PSA speaks somewhat to that, man, if you don't already have it in yourself, Tasha believes in tea. Tasha needs tea. And maybe it will show an individual that maybe if they don't worry about their own safety, harm coming to them, or them being incarcerated, maybe if they think about Tasha or their mother, their grandmother, their sister, that might spark the somebodyness in them, that they matter. They matter to their household, to their community, and it might prevent them or take them in a different path. And that household, that family, those associates, it can almost be anybody. I mean, I've had people growing up that weren't blood. We're just people that took a liking to me for whatever reason, and lent me a hand and gave me an encouraging word. Those are the things that, believe it or not, can help to end gun violence.
One of the reasons why we wanted to profile you today, because it helps me with a stereotype that I have been guilty of. I always assume that President Biden appoints U.S. attorneys who have no respect for the law, and they embrace this woke culture, and youth can go out and commit these crimes. But you're an example that the president does care about law enforcement, because you're allowed to do your job. Because the Bible said, give credit where credit is due, and you have to give credit to the president for making this appointment. Because listen, you're an example for other U.S. state attorneys of how to reduce crime. Because you're not here because you just happen to be an American who's black. You're here because you have to uphold the rule of law and protect the citizens against criminals in the society.
I'm here because I have a passion for public service. I believe that that's what I'm created to do. And this is an awesome opportunity to do that. The blessed thing is I'm not alone. There are so many talented professionals in my office and beyond that I am, so blessed and have the opportunity to work with. And I like to think that with my experience and the passion and the different thinking that I'm bringing to this, that we're having a great impact on crime in our state.
And we should get away from labels left and right, and we should just do the right thing.
Let's just get it done.
Let's just
get
get
the
it
work done.
Are you a native of Maryland?
I'm a native of D.C., but I've lived in Maryland, pretty much all my life. So, yeah.
Were you stunned when the president appointed you as the U.S. Attorney, the top dog of Maryland?
It was surreal, and every day, literally every day, I wake up and just I can't believe that it's turned out this way. I have come from very humble beginnings, but I have a hard-working mom who wouldn't allow me to fail. and there were many people throughout my life in the community who also lent me a helping hand, who gave me a positive word, and they probably, many of them I'll never know who exactly they are, and they probably didn't know that they had so much of an influence on me.
We want to thank you for enforcing the law.
Thank you.
And thank you so much, Mr. U.S.
Appreciate it.
Attorney, for joining us. That's a wrap. I'm Armstrong Williams.